welcome back to me talking about my versions of Marauders in podcast form with Emma. Just Emma today. Everybody else
Gone.
Forever. We don't like them anymore. Just kidding. Okay, anyway. Yeah, so I didn't ask the questions again today, but I wanted to talk to you about what's been frustrating me. So I'm just gonna rant to you, and that's gonna be our beginning thing. Are you ready? Okay, so TikTok. We appreciate it for, being able to do this. I couldn't have done it without TikTok, whatever. But it is so frustrating. I think I'm dying because, holy crap, I don't pay that much attention to, how my videos do on there because I'm making it for me,
Yeah.
Having a good time. Mm-hmm. Except last night, I was like, let's just look at these things. Let's try and figure out why all of my videos that mention my podcast do horribly. Because I already discovered whenever I say the word podcast on there, it
pushes it down.
Yeah, it pushes it down. It doesn't show up on the For You page. You can only find it if you go to my page or if you're, scrolling through the following tab. So I figured that out. What I didn't realize is that it does that all the time. And, all of my videos that have under 10,000 views that I thought they were just they just didn't do that well, whatever. All of them were like that. All of these random things. And I'm trying to figure out, I read the entire, community guidelines. The whole thing, top to bottom, trying to figure out what it was that I was doing. Because everything that I looked up is, sometimes if they think you violated a community guidelines but, nobody reported it, this is just what they do. They just don't show it on the For You page so that they don't get in trouble or whatever. But I'm trying to figure out what it was. And I was especially trying to figure out what it was because I thought so hard that I had gotten around the whole podcast thing with the last preview that I did because it wasn't cropped it didn't have the black bars. And it was, I never said anything in it that would say that it's a podcast or anything like that. Nothing in the caption. And I hashtagged it just like all my other stuff. And it still tanked. And it still didn't show up on the For You page. And then I realized it thinks that I'm using copyrighted material. Because it's too professional for a TikTok. And I'm like, dude, I have no idea what to do about that. And I can't report it. I can't do anything. And it's really frustrating.
That's fun.
Yeah. So I don't know what I'm going to do about that, but just the joys of being on TikTok. Do you have anything fun that has happened that you would like to talk about?
I'm going to Barnes & Noble with my friend today.
Yes! We love a good Barnes & Noble experience. Yeah. Actually, I'm partial to Books A Million now because they have more little trinkets and stuff.
Yeah.
And if you look around my room, I just kind of have a lot of those. Yeah. We can talk about our schedules.
Oh my gosh.
My school, my chorus teacher, I'm in leadership for a show choir. I'm a dance captain. I have to be there. I literally have to be there. I've been preparing for this all summer. And at the beginning of, in last February, he gave them a list of people, that had made it in. It's an audition choir. And then specifically, he's like, and these 3 people who are in leadership, you have to make sure they're in the class. You have to do it. And it's always worked out, and I don't know why, but this year, all 3 of us are just not in the class. And they didn't even replace mine. Some of them, the others, they just replaced it with, different classes. They didn't even replace mine. They just didn't give me a first period. And they were like, there you go. Yeah, and also, now I'm not in a class with Emma, and it was a one class. Have we ever had a class together in high school?
No.
Ever. We haven't had a class in school. Period. That sucks. That really sucks, dude. But I thought maybe this would be the year, but they just said no.
Because we looked, because you could see, the teacher at first, but it didn't tell you when you had it, and we had one of the same teacher.
I know, we had the same teacher.
No.
Now it's different. Okay, so this one...
Back to the magic school.
I'm scared for how people will react to this a little bit. It might be a little... I don't know.
I'm worried, but...
It's Snape's worst memory.
Oh.
But yeah, so there's some things that we know happened that will happen in this episode. And yeah, it's just my version of how everything goes down. And I've had people asking me about what I think happened with Snape's worst memory since, like, I've been doing TikTok. Yeah. And I've never given an answer. And today I'm going to give an answer. So let's see. All right. So scene 1. The school year is officially, winding down, but, like, also ramping up because it's OWL season. So it's crunch time. It's study time. All is crazy. And so, like, Peter is just like, I'm gonna fail everything, Nice. He's like, you gotta go in with low expectations. Yeah, you gotta just go in with the worst. But I think Peter's actually fine. It's just in comparison to how smart the others are. He's like, I'm horrible. And then James, of course, doesn't have to try, and he's gonna get O's on everything, and it's gonna be whatever. But Remus and Lily actually have to study for their smarts, so they're spending a lot of time in, like, the room of requirement and stuff like that. And also, library. Yeah, in the Muggle library. They're, like, studying, they're actually, for arithmancy, they're studying, like, actual math, and that's how they're able to pass. Oh my goodness. Anyway, but yeah, it's at this time of the year when, like, James especially is like, guys, we're gonna calm down from, like, general pranking, general commotion causing. People are studying. Like, let's let it go. That's why they did their big one. You don't want people to, like, hate them and be and also, I forgot. We have to mention the red and gold coming off because we didn't mention that the last time. So definitely, like, over half is still, like, red and gold. They're just like, we're just vibing, y'all. We don't want to do it. No, but I think what ended up happening was the Marauders had to be the last ones. They had to keep it on the longest and everything. Yeah. But the others, like Peter and Remus and honestly even Sirius, it was pretty uneventful. They just like, okay, we're just gonna pick this day and we're gonna shut up. James had to try a couple of times. He usually didn't get it past, like, the 12-hour mark. But then this one time he's like, guys, I, like, actually have to do it. I am actually getting kind of sick of this. Like, it's been a couple months at this point. I don't know. Gosh, probably has been months, but it's been a while. And he's like, guys, I'm gonna actually do it. And so he does. And then, like, at hour, like, 23 or something, Remus is like, Lily, can you just do something really, really funny? And she's like, what is it? He's like, just go up and just talk to him because he can't talk back. And she's like, yes, I will. So she goes up to him and she's just like, I think basically, she doesn't say anything, like, crazy. She just goes up to him and is like, I just want to say, I've actually really enjoyed what you've done this time because for once in your life, you shut the bleep up. And I just really appreciate that. I think it's a beautiful thing. And she's like, I do appreciate it. Yes. She's like, I'm not even a Slytherin, but I love and appreciate it. She's like, I just think it's a beautiful thing that you've created because you've shut up. Anyway, I will always despise you. Have a good day. And then she just left. So that's a fun little thing that happened. James, despite, her saying, like, oh, I literally hate you, he's like, I have never been more in love with anybody in my entire life. James has this fantasy of Lily in his head, and it's just not who Lily is. But yeah. But then we're going to move on to Sirius. So Sirius has not been trying this entire year because he's like, I'm gonna fail all my OWLs because I want my parents to, like, be mad at me, basically. That kind of thing. He's, like, has that mindset. And, I think the Potters, like, the parents, Effie and Monty, were like, he's gonna get over that. He's gonna realize that that's a stupid idea. He's just not. He didn't on his own. So they sent him a letter that was like, dude, if you ever want to, like, get out of your house and, like, do something without their help, you need to pass your OWLs, dude. And he's like, oh, shoot, I need to, like, pass my OWLs. So he's in, like, crunch time now. Yes, he really is. So he begins to study, like, a lot. Like, always in the library and just everything like that. And he's going to be fine because he's also incredibly smart. He's just as smart as James. He just hasn't been paying attention in class for, like, the past year. So, there's that happening, too. So yeah, let's move on to a little Lily Snape scene. So like Lily is so ready for summer because summer is when like she and Snape are like
back to normal.
Yeah, they're back to normal. They're besties, and she's like, she's realizing kind of like how bad his friends are and everything. She's like, we didn't need to like get him away from that, and then like I'll talk with him and it'll be great. Like I'll fix everything over the summer. So she's ready for everything to be done. And they've returned to like their regular like Thursday night meetings. They're having a good time.
They bring like snacks too. Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah, they're just like in an empty classroom, and the next day they just find like wrapping everywhere and everything. No, but Snape has pretty different plans for the summer. Oh. He's like, I'm gonna spend some time with like the Lestranges and the Malfoys and stuff like that, and like all these people that have like graduated from Hogwarts. And he's like even like the Black family, and she's like, dude.
She's like, I thought we hated them.
She's like, I thought we hated Sirius. He's like, Sirius is the worst, but the others are great.
Wow.
But yeah, so she's like, why would you want to hang out with them? Like, I don't even, like, know anything about purebloods, but I know that they're, like, horrible. Like, they have this reputation. They were horrible when, like, the few of them were here, like, when they were 7th years and they were, like, 1st years or whatever. And he's like, but Lily, they will give me so many good connections in the wizarding world. And she's like
those aren't good
She's like, they're connections. But she's like, connections to what? Those Death Eaters that I'm, like, hearing about? And he's like, no. He's like, those are lies that people are saying. Those are basically fake news at this point.
Fake news.
Oh my gosh. She's like, is it though? Because I've heard Asia talk about these families. Is that she's like the prefect, the Slytherin prefect. I think she's like chill. She's kind of fed up with that house. That's kind of, her person. He's like, what would she know about it? She's not even like one of us. And she's like, okay, she knows a lot.
The fact that you're saying one of us makes me
it's a little concerning. But she's like, she's prefect with that, Edmund Florence dude, and he like wants to become a Death Eater, Severus. Like, he does.
Fun.
And then, Snape is like, okay, but, like, listen, everybody keeps on throwing around this word Death Eater, and, like, you don't even know what they actually are. And, he's like, people just came up with a name, and they just decided that, like, that's what it is, and they're saying that anybody who, like, likes the Dark Lord is, like, a Death Eater. And she's like,
yeah.
She's like, yeah.
She's like, are you saying you like him, boy?
Well, here's the thing. Lily doesn't know a whole lot about this.
Yeah.
Because she's been friends with Snape, and, like, what is Snape gonna tell her?
Snape's not gonna be like, yeah, so...
Yeah, he's not gonna tell her
like,
all that.
Here's all these fun things.
All she basically knows is that he's, like, bad. But, like, some people, like Snape, are kind of okay with him because they think that he, like, is... like, trying to return to, like... Yeah, trying to return to just, like, traditional values. And just, like, everybody else hates him because of it, type of thing. And so, but since her time away from him, she's heard some things. And she's like, okay, but everybody says that these Death Eaters are, like, literally killing people. And he's like, that's a lie. Nobody's been able to prove it. Like, what is even happening? Like, it's just fake. And she's like, okay, but anybody who, like... all these disappearances that are happening that we see in the Daily Prophet are happening from people who don't like Voldemort.
She's like, I'm seeing a bit of a...
She's like, everybody's seeing a bit of a pattern here, but, like, even though nobody can prove it, it's like something fishy's happening here. And he's like, listen, those people are probably just doing it to make the Dark Lord look bad. Like, come on.
Oh, they're just mysteriously disappearing to make it look bad.
Anyway, he's like Lily, he's like, you don't even know anything about this. Like, you really don't. And honestly, she kind of doesn't. So he kind of has a point. So let's move on to the next little scene. So people don't really talk about the war stuff at Hogwarts. Yeah. It's kind of like a taboo subject. Mm-hmm. People are knowing that people are disappearing. Nobody's feeling very safe. And they're pretty sure it has something to do with, like...
So no one wants to talk about it, because then they're gonna...
Yeah, and then they're like, they don't want to talk about it, but everybody's pretty sure that it has something to do with, like, this cult, basically, that's happening here. And they're a little suspicious. Mm-hmm. But basically, when Snape is talking about it, it kind of just sounds like politics to Lily. And she's like, I'm not really interested in politics. And, like, this kind of seems a little bit much. Or, like, especially when, you know, they were younger. She only knows that story. She knows that it's, like, this guy who's, like, against the ministry, basically, and everything like that. But she doesn't understand it.
Yeah, because she's, like, only, like, in the world during school. And if no one's talking about it in school...
Like, what does she know?
Yeah.
But everybody just kind of assumes that all the Muggleborns know about it, when a lot of them really don't, or a lot of them only know, like, what people have told them and stuff like that. So anyway, she and Remus are studying, and she's like, Remus, can I ask you something? And he's like, sure, like, what are we gonna get? We're surely not gonna get into a big conversation here. And she's like, what do you know about, like, the Dark Lord? And he's like,
what a fun subject.
He's like, I can't wait. No, but honestly, he's like, less than you, I'm sure, because, like, you're friends with Snape. And she's like, see, but I don't think he's telling me things. And Remus is like, wait, what? And she's like, I don't think he's telling me everything. And he's like, well, okay, what do you know? And she's like, I don't, just, you tell me about it. I don't want to, like, say what I know and then be, like, super embarrassed. Mm-hmm. And so he does. He's like, okay. He's like, this wizard. He's like, we'll start there. And he's like, he's just like,
I thought he was a muggle.
No, but he's like, people don't know what to call Voldemort at this point in time. So he's like a politician, ? But, like, we don't know. He would never run for anything, but he, like, has so much influence. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you know, he has a really different idea about how things should be in the wizarding world. And he's, like, really smart and powerful and, like, scary and horrible. And he's, you know, has all of these horrible wizarding families, like, in the palm of his hand. Like, he can do anything, and they just do it for him. He's like, it's basically a cult. And she's like, okay, so those families, those are the Death Eaters. And he's like, yeah, most of them, some of them, like, are, and some of them aren't, but it's like, you know, they still do something, even though they're not called Death Eaters, and stuff like that. He's like, but they'll just do anything to get more people on his side, like, anything, and it's getting scary, and, you know, that's why, you know, he's like, I've heard Sirius talk about, like, entire families that just get, like, threatened and stuff like that, and that's why everybody shuts up about it. And Lily's like, okay, but, like, why? Like, I don't understand, like, what could he give them? And he's like, well, power in, like, this new system or whatever. And she's like, okay, but, like, what is this new thing? She's like, nobody talks about what it is. And she's like, what does he want to change so badly? And Remus is like, oh my gosh, like, you're telling me you don't know. And she's like, I don't know, but don't look at me like I'm an idiot, please. And he's like, Snape has never told you what it is that Voldemort hates. And she's like, no, not really. And he's like, Lily. He's like, he's getting angry. He's like, did Snape not tell you what it is that, like, they're all about? And he's like, well, like, traditional stuff. He's like, no, like, what's the thing? And she's like, I don't know. He's like, Lily. She's like, he doesn't think Muggleborns should be allowed to use magic. He's a blood purist. And then she's like, what?
And he's like, Snape is telling me he's not that bad. What?
She's like, wait. And Remus is just, like, uncomfortable. He's like, okay, Lily, how do I say this? People don't like Muggleborns. You know that. And she's like, yeah, but, like, I thought that was just, like, you know, kids think they're better than me because their whole family is wizards. Like, she's like, it's just stupid kid things. And he's like, it's really not. It's, like, this whole thing. He's like, did you not know this? And she's like, I don't know. Snape always just was like, it's a misconception that, like, all the Dark Lord's followers hate Muggleborns. He's like, no, Lily, that's the whole thing. That's exactly what he supports. That's it.
That's literally his whole, like, platform.
That's the whole thing. And she had no idea.
Oh,
she was like,
Lily.
I know. So she's, like, shocked here. And Remus has no idea what to say because he's like, what the heck? And
he was like, I was just trying to do math, man.
No, but he is angry. He is, like, angry at Snape. Yeah. Like, so bad. Because he's like, Snape just never told her. He just let you stay friends with him without
And he's been
knowing.
supporting this, and all his friends have, and just didn't even let her know.
Yeah, and so he's, like, angry, but then, like, after Lily processes a bit, she's like, okay, so those people disappearing, those people that everybody thinks the Death Eaters are killing, those are people that support Muggleborns? And he's like, Lily, those are Muggleborns.
Oh,
that's what's happening. That's the thing. And she's like, oh my gosh. And she's like, okay, but the Daily Prophet, why isn't the Daily Prophet, like, said any of this? Like, what is happening here? She's like, how could I have not known about all of this? And he's like, we don't know for sure, but they're not reporting explicitly what it is probably because they don't want to cause extreme panic over everything. And probably because they're also under control of the Death Eaters somehow. But he's like, but that's what's been happening. He's like, they've all been Muggleborns that are disappearing. That's why it's so scary. And Lily's like, shook. She's like, her whole world. So. Yeah, her whole world is just like absolutely crazy. She never knew. And that's the big plot twist. Yeah, but she asked Remus, she's like, don't tell anybody that I didn't know, because I don't want that, getting out and stuff like that. She's like, I want to just figure this out on my own. And he's like, I get it, like, I won't. Remus is mad at Snape. Remus doesn't get very angry very easily, but he's like, that is the sickest thing I've ever heard in my entire life, that he just still stayed friends with her and just kept all of it from her. He's like, knowing that he was like her only information about the wizarding world and everything, and just like being that selfish, he can't deal with it. And so he's like, he lets Lily have some alone time in like the room of requirement or whatever, and so then he's like walking back to the common room, and of course, who does he run into but Snivellus himself. And so Remus has spent basically the entire year like taking Lily's word and being like, Snape is like better than he appears, and like, trusting her and everything, and saying that he's not as bad and he's not joining in with the others when they like, are cursing him or whatever and everything like that. He's tried to stay out of it so much. And but especially because he doesn't like hurting people at all, even if he knows that they're horrible. But here he snaps. Yeah. He feels this overwhelming rage, and he just goes at Snape. Like, he is like, it's like, he calls him Snivellus. He's like, Snivellus! And then he just, like, goes at him, and he's like, basically chasing him through the castle, like, on a rampage, throwing curses like crazy. Like, no one's ever seen Remus like this. He's like, yeah. And then, he finally manages to disarm Snape, and then literally just physically starts to beat him up. Like, just something has snapped. He's just punching this man. And it's like, what is even happening? He hasn't punched anybody since he was like 6, like on a Muggle playground or something like that. And he's like,
This is not a Muggle playground.
This is not a Muggle playground. Yeah, and he only finally like comes out of this like absolute just blind rage when somebody's like pulling him off with Snape, and then he realizes it's Sirius, and Sirius is freaked out. He's like, I have never seen you like this. I'm worried. What is happening? Are you okay? Like, everything like that. Like, even when Remus is like the wolf, it's like the wolf is like in pain and stuff. It's not just this blind rage and like, I'm going to attack people. And it's scary. And, as soon as, like, Remus, like, realizes, like, he comes back into himself and he's like, what just happened? He, like, hates it. He's, like, disgusted by everything that he's just done. And his hands are all bloody. And he realizes he has, like, Snape's wand. And he just throws back the wand and starts walking away. And Sirius is like, wait, what did he do? Like, are we just gonna, like, forget this? And Remus is like, I've done enough. Like, it's fine. So Snape leaves. And Sirius, who was only out this late because, like, he was at, like, the library and he's been, like, studying like crazy or whatever. And he, like, picks up all of his books and he follows Remus, and it's just, like, it's total roles reversed. Like, he just pulled Remus off of fighting Snape, and he was just in the library and everything, and it's just, their roles have really switched here, and he just kind of feels like, this is crazy. But yeah, then, like, shame is starting to sink into Remus. He hates hurting people, and he's like, even if it was Snape, he can't stop thinking about, like, you know, Snape had a bloody nose or whatever because he was punching him. And he's like, I can't do that. He's, like, absolutely losing his mind. And Sirius is like, hey, dude, like
what's
up? What happened here? What? And Remus is just like, Snape's an a-hole. And he's like, well, yeah, I know that. What else is new? And Remus is like, it was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. And he's like, well, I mean, maybe we're justified. He's kind of a terrible person. But Sirius is like, are you sure you're okay? I've never seen you like that before. And he's like, yep, and hopefully you never will again. And Sirius is like, okay. And just he never tells the others about that. And, like, he's like, okay. He just has a feeling that Remus would not ever want him to talk about that, which is true. It was not Remus's proudest moment ever. Yeah. I feel like we need a little breather.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. So we'll move on to arithmancy. So, next day at arithmancy, as stated, Lily sits down and is like, what on earth were you thinking? Snape just told me, like, what happened last night. She's like, what were you thinking? And he's like, I wasn't thinking. And she's like, yeah, obviously. She's like, if that's gonna help him not become a Death Eater by you just, like, absolutely beating him up. And Remus is like, you don't hate him now? Like, you don't? And she's like, no. She's like, I mean, yeah, I'm horrified. It was horrible what he did. But I can't imagine that he, like, even really knows about it. You know, how could he be, like, he's my best friend. How could he be a blood purist or whatever?
Lily.
And, but she does not sound convinced.
I feel so...
I know.
That's so sad.
I know. She doesn't sound sure of herself. Remus doesn't want to say anything. And she's like, you know, maybe he's different. And he's like, maybe. And yeah, but she's like, I just need to make it to the summer where not everybody's around here and, like, actually figure this out and everything. I just need to not have a horrible, and she's like, in the meantime, I just need to not have horrible affiliations with all of the Gryffindors, please, because they might be his only friends next year. And Remus is like, yeah, I know, I really didn't mean to, I'm sorry. And she's like, and, you know, Remus, now it's really sinking into Remus. He's like, okay, so bullying Snape is not, like, the great way to change his mind about this. And, like, maybe the Marauders did have something to do with, you know, this stuff. Maybe. Possibly. Anyway, the next night, Remus is up a bit late and decides that he's gonna go for a little stroll to clear his head. He's had a lot on his mind recently. Yeah. And he walks down into the common room and he hears, like, sniffles of, like, somebody crying. And he's like, oh no. He's like, I do not want to have to be a prefect and, like, find another second year, like, crying or whatever. He's like, not my vibe for the day. But then he looks around and it's Sirius. Sirius is straight up not having a good time, not gonna lie. He is, like, surrounded by, like, all of his study materials and he's been, like, working himself to the bone. And Remus is like, oh no. And he just, like, clears his throat. And then Sirius, like, pretends that he was not just, like, doing it. He's like, what? I'm all good. I don't know what you're talking about. And Remus is like, sure. He's like, what's wrong? And Sirius is like, I literally haven't been paying attention all year, and I'm going to fail my exams. I don't know anything. What is happening with me? He's like, it's going to be so bad. And Remus is like, okay, we're going to go to the kitchens, and we're going to get some food, and it's going to make everything all better. And they do. And, you know, they're down there, and Sirius is just, like, ranting to him. He's like, I've been so stressed because, holy crap, if I fail, then, like, what am I gonna do with my life? Like, I'm never gonna get a chance to, like, leave my family, and I've been so stupid. Why was I, like, not studying this entire year? And I'm freaking out. He's like, okay, you're gonna pass. I promise. You're, like, incredibly smart. And he's like, and Sirius is like, okay, but, like, no, I haven't been paying attention. All I know is Defense Against the Dark Arts and divination a little bit, and I do know Muggle studies, but, like, everything else, like, no. And Remus was like, okay, you're insanely good at, like, charms and transfiguration and all of these things that we've been doing this entire year. You just don't know specifically what this year
He's like,
was.
you come up with, like, all of those, like, spells.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna be...
You know, Sirius has just completely psyched himself out. He's been studying way too much, and just, like, now he's, like, overthought everything and everything like that. And Remus is like, okay, so you need some sleep. When is the last time you got, like, more than an hour of sleep at a time? And he's like, it's been a bit. And he's like, okay, so you're gonna go to sleep. Sirius is like, no.
Remus is like, okay.
Remus is like, oh.
You're going to sleep.
He's like, I'm your mom now. This is what
He's
happens.
like, you don't have a choice, I'm the prefect.
Yeah. But anyway, so he's like, okay, if we're not gonna go to sleep now, then we're gonna make a schedule for you. And Remus does. But Sirius is like, this is so stupid, I'm not gonna do it.
And it's literally like on a napkin.
Yes, it's like it's on a napkin, and it's titled "How Sirius Will Pass His Exams," and it just has all the different days. It's like each day we're gonna study something else, and I'm gonna help you, and James and Peter are gonna help us, and most importantly, like, they schedule in times for him to take breaks and times where he can't do it. And one of those times is the next day, and so he's like, you're gonna go to sleep, and you're gonna sleep like. You're not gonna wake up, okay? And if you wake up, I'm gonna yell at you.
He's like, you saw what happened to Snape? You better...
He's like, that's what happened with Snape.
He wasn't sleeping.
Oh my gosh. No, but so finally, you know, Sirius goes back and he goes to sleep. And the next morning when, like, the others are awake and they're like, why isn't Sirius awake? He's like, don't wake up. Don't wake up. It's not good. He's like, we're gonna do this plan. And it's not even like he's like, hey, why don't we help him out? He's like, we're going to do it. He's like, these are your assignments. This is what you're helping him with. This is what I'm helping him with. And, like, Peter is like, okay, dude, I'm gonna fail. I'm also, like, not good at, like, these exams. Like, I'm more concerned with myself not passing. And he's like, I'm sorry, do you have an evil family that you can't escape? He's like, I'm so sorry. Are you in date? And Peter's like, honestly, sometimes with you guys, it feels like I do have an evil family that I can't escape.
And he's like, this will help you too, Peter.
Yeah. But
he's like, if you're gonna be teaching him, you have to know the subject.
Yeah. Anyway, but James is happy because all he has to do is, like, play Quidditch with Sirius when he's, like, on breaks and stuff, and he's like, I'm good with this. This is good for me. But yeah. So the schedule, like, went really well for everything, basically, except for, like, History of Magic, which is difficult for Sirius to pay attention to. You know? He's like, there's nothing, like, practical that he can do to, like, practice it. Like, it's just memorization.
Yeah.
And so the highlight of the week was Remus being like, okay, so you like songs. You like Muggle songs. We're gonna make it a song. And Sirius is like, no. This is not happening. He's like, I'm not going to do this.
He's like,
nope.
It's happening.
He's like, and Remus is like, okay. So he starts very poorly singing the notes. Like, he's like, but to Rebel Rebel by David Bowie.
Oh,
so
yeah.
He's like, the Goblin Wars. Da, 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 da. It's so bad, and Sirius is cringing so hard, but Remus, like, insists that he has to memorize the song, and he sings it, like, so many times, and he makes Sirius sing it, and it's, like, so bad, but
No, with that stuff, you have to be, like, fully on board. You just have to go for it, because otherwise it
of course, Sirius eventually got on board, but he still hated it, you know? He's like, this is so stupid. But yeah, so that happens. And then, like, you know, it works out for all of them. And then suddenly, like, right before exams, Sirius just gets this confidence. And he's like, I'm gonna ace everything. I'm so good at this. Why did I ever even think I couldn't? And, like, you know, he really does breathe through all of his OWLs. And, you know, he's doing great. But the best part was, like, he, in the History of Magic one, just from across the room, it's just, da-da-da-da-da.
And Reeves is like, you're welcome.
It's so good. But yeah, there was even, like, I just, you know, forgot to basically include this, but yeah, there was, like, a full moon before the exams, too, and everything like that, but it didn't slow any of them down. They were still like, we're gonna ace it. They're all...
He was like, wakes up and he's like, what's the song?
Literally. Padfoot howls Rebel Rebel while they're... Oh my gosh. But yeah, Sirius is way too confident and, like, very much arrogant because he's like, I am, like, acing these exams. I know them. I'm so good at it. And then, I think we all kind of know what's coming after the end of their Defense Against the Dark Arts OWL. Do you know? Do you remember?
Do you want Jeffrey? I thought you meant it was gonna be Jeffrey coming back.
No!
I'm upset.
I just had to hand you Jeffrey so that you feel better.
I got excited.
I'm so sorry. But unfortunately it is Snape's worst memory happening.
I do remember this.
So yeah, so I think we all know what goes down. But I had it here just to kind of go through it. Oh yeah, and the snitch too. I hope you haven't forgotten that James has been playing with the snitch occasionally, like, this entire year. It's just kind of what he does.
James.
It's so stupid. I feel like I need to remind people of that.
Gryffindor better have, like, those, like, you know, like, the end of year, like, awards that are just, like, the joke ones, and then they're, like... I don't know, like, they're like, the snitch award goes to James.
But can't help but remind people he plays Quidditch goes to James Potter. But yeah, so they go through, they're all joking, and, like, you know, they all obviously ace that exam and everything except for Peter. You know, Remus pulls out his book. Things are nice. Then they decide to just absolutely go at Snape. Not the best thing.
Wasn't Remus literally like, maybe we shouldn't bully him?
Literally. Yes, he was. But he's not thrilled.
Come on, man.
And it's just James and Sirius, I'll remind you, basically. And, you know, they're just going at him, and...
Snape was clearly unpopular.
Snape was clearly unpopular. You know, and he's like, what are you gonna do? Snivelly, wipe your nose with I'm sorry, it's not nice, but they're so funny. It's not okay, but it is funny. Oh yeah, it just says that throughout this entire time, Remus is just staring at his book. He's, like, not even reading it, he's just looking at it.
Shout out to him.
He's just like, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to be involved with this, basically. And, you know, they are all just going at him. And
he's,
you know,
like, used up all his, like,
he's like,
energy.
I'm done. He's like, I've been studying, everything like that. But, you know, and then Lily shows up, and she's like, literally, stop. Can you guys please just stop? And James is like, all right, Evan. And she's like, leave him alone. And James is like, no, he exists, you know? Yeah, she's like, you think you're funny, but you're just an arrogant, bullying toe rag, Potter. Leave him alone. And he's like, I will if you go out with me. And, you know.
Wow, James.
What
a great moment.
Mm-hmm. But then, you know, it's Snape. And she's like, I wouldn't go out with you if it was a choice between you or the giant squid. And then, you know, Snape throws a curse at James, and, like, a bloody curse. Like, cuts his face.
Ew.
So anyway, so then he, you know, James gets him up in the air or whatever. He's hanging upside down. And people are cheering, blah, blah, blah. People are laughing. And Lily's like, let him down. And he's like, sure. And he, like, drops to the ground or whatever. And they're all just, you know, being horrible. And then, you know, Lily says, like, take the curse off of him. And James is like, fine. And he does. And then he's like, there you go. You're lucky Evans was here, Snivellus. And then then he says the words. He says, "I don't need help from filthy little mudbloods like her."
No!
Ah!
Snape.
Snape.
You can't just be rescued by her and then say that.
You really can't.
Literally. Dude.
And so Lily says, "Fine, I won't bother in the future, and I'd wash your pants if I were you." Snivelous.
Wow.
Oh!
What a...
She called him Snivelous! I will never get over that. But anyway. And then James is like, "Apologize, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "You're just as bad as he is." And then she has the best line ever. "Messing up your hair because you think it looks cool. Look like you've just gotten off your broomstick. Showing up with that stupid snitch. Walking down the corridors and hexing anyone who annoys you just because you can. I'm surprised your broomstick can get off the ground with that fat head on it. You make me sick." It's my favorite. Actually, no. My favorite line is coming up. My favorite line in all of the books is coming up.
Go off, Lily.
And so then she leaves, and James is like, "What? Why did she leave?"
Why would she leave?
And serious, this is my favorite line in the entire thing. "Reading between the lines, I'd say she thinks you're a bit conceited, mate." It's the best line. It's my favorite
Sirius.
one. We're like, "Thank you, Sirius." Yeah. Yeah, and then the whole thing where it's like, "Who wants to see me take off Snivelly's pants?" But he doesn't. And now let's go back into my thing.
Wow.
Yeah, so, like, Remus has, like, not been, paying attention to this. But when Lily, like, yells at them, he's like, "Oh, shoot, like, Lily means this now." And he's like, he finally knows that, like, Lily finally saw, for, like, what he was there. And she's like, "Oh, shoot." But yeah, so Remus is mad. He just looked like, he was like, "We were almost done with the end of the exams, and I know that my friends are full of themselves, and I know that they haven't done anything fun in weeks, but, like, really?" He's like, "Really?" And the thing that bothered him the most was how different their interaction with Snape was from the one that he had just had with him. Because they both, beat up Snape or whatever. But, like, Remus regretted it. And Remus, hated that he did that. But he's looking at his friends doing this, and they're all just, like, laughing. And he's like, "Holy crap, my friends are mean. Like, this is real." And, like, he's just, like, losing his mind. He's like, he knows that they hated them, but he's like, they're just having fun. And it just really messes with him. He's like, "Oh my gosh, my friends are terrible. What is happening? Did not realize that. I'm a little scared." And so then Lily leaves, and then Remus is mad. And so then he gets up, and he's like, he tells them all to...
He's like, "Pull it together, everyone."
He's like, "Shut up." He's like, "You guys have to literally stop." And he physically, like, takes James's wand from him, and he's, like, yelling at them both to stop. He takes his wand from him, he tells him to, like, let Snape down, and obviously that happens. And James is really mad at, like, his public rejection that just happened. From Lily. And so then he starts to yell at Remus, and Remus is yelling right back at them, and Sirius is trying to calm them both down, and it's like a whole thing, and like everybody's like, "What is happening? Like, we've never seen these guys fight before. Like, what is going on?" And then Peter, like, finally, like, joins in, and he's like, "Guys, Snape left. What are we doing?" And they're like, And so then finally Remus, kind of comes back into himself again, and gives James back his wand, and then just heads up to their dorm. And that was very dramatic. They don't really yell at each other, but it happened. So that's a bit concerning. And it's about to happen a lot more. So anyway, so the next scene, the boys, go up to their dorm to try and, like, talk to Remus. Remus does not want to talk with them right now. He's done. So he goes downstairs, he refuses to talk, and so does James, but, like, the other two are like, "Guys, like, come on, like, it'll be okay." But it might not be okay.
No.
And anyway, then, like, Remus, like, refuses to, then it's, like, later in the night, and, like, everybody is kind of, like, left the common room in general, because they're like, "I don't want to be a part of this." Yeah. So everybody kind of went to bed at, like, the actual time they were supposed to go to bed. And Remus is like, I'm not going up to bed." And they're like, "Remus, calm down." So then they start to argue more. And James's argument is basically like, "Dude, why are you suddenly, like, on Snape's side? What happened here? Why are you, like, all sympathetic to him and everything?" And Remus is like, "Okay, I basically missed the part where we started hurting people for no reason. Like, who is that helping?" And James is like, okay, dude, what have you been doing? Like, you haven't been, saying anything about this until now. Like, what is happening? And he's like, why were you defending us and now you're suddenly not? Like, why are you switching sides and everything like that? And Remus is like, yeah, I was blinded to the fact that somehow my friends are the bad guys. And, like, it's like this whole thing. But those are basically their arguments. And Remus is like, I thought that since you guys were kind and you helped me, like, that meant that you were kind to others, and I was just completely blinded by that. But you guys are jerks, which is kind of true. I mean, they kind of are at this moment in time. Like, they just, and Remus is just like, it is just not with me that, even if they're bad people, like, you shouldn't bully them. And that's where he's at right now. Especially with, like, what Lily was saying. She's like, it's the only way that we can help him is if, he doesn't hate everybody that's good. Yeah. And he's just like, he's not having it. But he's like, honestly, he's like, it just feels like you guys just wrote me into this, and that's not what I would have ever wanted to do, and I'm, like, upset with you guys. And James is like, okay, dude, that's not a thing. We beat up Death Eaters, and are you saying that you have a problem with that? Like, what is happening here? Peter and Sirius are both just, like, trying not to interject, and everything like that, and just trying to, like, let them have whatever thing this is, because out of all of them, James and Remus are not the ones that would be fighting, This is weird. But finally Sirius is like, okay, what about, he still doesn't say what Remus did, but he's like, okay, what about the other night, though? Like, you are doing this too. Why are you so mad at us? And Remus is like, yeah, and that didn't feel like me at all. What have I turned into because of you guys? And it's like, yeah, it's a lot of just feelings that may or may not be valid, but they're there.
It's just everything all at once.
Yeah, and it's just all happening. And then James is like, eventually, after they've, like, been yelling for, like, way too long, James is like, what are you gonna do? Just, like, stop being friends with us? And Remus is like, until you guys change? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm gonna do.
Wow.
And it's like, whoa, what? And everybody's, like, quiet for a second.
It has been a rough year for them.
Yeah, it really has. This has been by far their worst year. And then James is angry at this point, and this is just angry James, and he says, like, unkind things about Remus not really having any other friends besides them, and he's like, and who would take your side with, like, all the Slytherins and stuff and everything like that? And Remus is like, I'm not taking sides with the Slytherins, I'm trying to not take sides with anybody that, like, fights each other, that type of thing. And unfortunately, that's kind of where they leave things for the night, in that very not good place. And also, unfortunately, Lily, who is still out doing her prefect rounds without Remus, because Remus totally slipped his mind, so she got back to the common room late, and completely unnoticed by the rest of them, had heard, like, the entire conversation, and had just been, like, standing in the corner of the room, like, what is happening here? Trying not to listen, but, like, she can't get around them to, like, go up, so she's like, well, I guess I'm here now. But she basically hears all of Remus' side of the story and everything like that. And all sides of it, really. But, the others go upstairs, and Remus insists on, like, leaving, and he's just, like, going for, like, a walk around the castle or something, giving everybody time to pretend to be asleep before he gets back. It's not good. This is not them. This is not what happens with the boys. This is not ideal.
The boys.
Not the boys.
Not the boys fighting.
Not the boys fighting. But the next morning, like, James and Sirius and Peter get up, and they, like, can't believe what happened. Like, they don't fight like this, and, they're all kind of expecting, they don't know if this is gonna go on, or if they're all just gonna apologize and kumbaya, and, like, that's the rest of it, or whatever. They don't know. Because they're just like, we've just been, like, stressed out or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so then they go downstairs, and they get dressed quietly, and Remus is still there, and he's, like, not wanting to get up, and they're like, okay. So they go downstairs, everybody's talking about what happened, because, like, they're like, okay, what's happening? Are Lily and Snape even still friends? Like, did Remus defend Snape? Like, what is happening here? And when, like, the three of them go down to breakfast without Remus, it's, like, even more so, and everybody's like, oh, like, what's going on here? Like, I can't believe, like, that they would all not be friends. Like, what is this drama that's happening? And then, after what seems like forever, Remus finally comes down to breakfast. And he walks into the hall, he doesn't speak to anybody, and he walks right past James, Sirius, and Peter. And then he stops directly across from Lily, and she looks up at him, and she's like, hey, dude. And he's like, yeah, I think it's about time that the school knew that we were friends. Best friends. Don't you? And she's like, even though she just had, like, this horrible day the past day, she smiles, and she's like, yeah, I think that's a great idea. And then Remus sits down. And that's the end of the episode.
What?
Yeah, so yeah, I think James is gonna be perfectly fine with this. What do you think?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, I can't see any of them being thrilled. But, yeah, so that's kind of fun. And how is Snape? Snape, too? Like, if he sees this, he's gonna be like, Yeah, so it was nobody's best day, which is why I'm thinking of naming it, The Worst Memories, because it was Snape's worst memory, but I feel like it was kind of everybody's worst memory. It was, like, not anything good happened that day, you know? Yeah. And also, poor Lily.
Dude, poor everyone. No one's
I know,
having a good time.
but poor Lily, because she didn't even know about, like, the whole Muggle-born thing. Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Anyway, this is the official Snape slander episode.
Wow.
We don't like Snape at all. 0 out of 10 for Snape. What do you think?
I'm not a huge fan of him.
Yeah. Are you a little fan of him?
Not really.
I love when people say that. Like,
he's an interesting character. Like, I appreciate him as a character, but, like, as a person,
yeah,
I don't think we would be friends.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed.
I hope you enjoyed all this sadness.
Yes, I hope you did. There's only 2 more episodes left in the whole season, though, so
yeah,
things will get happy. I promise. Things will end happy. And yeah. But yeah, thank you for watching and listening. And a shout out to Malia Black and Benji Wilson. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Bye. Oh my gosh. Oh, my poor teacher. Oh, that poor man. Anyway.
What?
We will now pause the podcast. I'm trying to get in contact with one of my teachers because, again, my schedule is messed up. And he was like, I'll call you after a meeting. And I was like, okay. And then that was like an hour ago. And I was like, when's the meeting over? And he was like, it's supposed to be over an hour and a half ago. But our principal won't stop talking about random things. And apparently our principal is now dancing. And I just get that message. It was pretty fun. I hate our principal so much.
I'm sure Mr. Finn is loving this.
I'm literally sure that he literally hates it so much. I'm so sure.